We're very happy to have to host this special Talking ASEAN. The beauty of social media is that you can follow up and be connected to your friends all the time. And I'm one of those avid followers of Yuyun, and follows her every move. I don't stalk. I'm not stalking Yuyun or anything, but it just sometimes, because there's so many interesting things happening on the things that she does. And when she posted that the publication has just come out, I said, I said it on her Facebook. Let's do a launch in Jakarta. Let's do this. If Kun Apichai is here and everyone's here, so that's how it started. And so we're very happy and very, very honored to be hosting the Jakarta launch of this publication, the Regional Development and Challenges in Southeast Asia. And we're very fortunate to have also Kun Apichai here, who just happens to be in Jakarta for a series of workshops. So we're catching him on his first day. He just landed. He hasn't even checked into his hotel yet. We've kidnapped him from the airport and have him come straight here for this discussion. So we're very fortunate to have it hot off the press. If you haven't gotten your copy yet, it's available. Mine is signed already, so this is my copy. Kun Apichai hasn't signed mine yet. We're always happy to host our friends when they come to Jakarta to speak about ASEAN, because I think we have our Talking ASEAN series, and often it's not the voices that speak on the panel are mostly Indonesian because of the budget most of the time. But we're very glad to have Kun Apichai here today to talk about the book, and we're also very glad to have Yuyun, who's usually traveling, but I think for this one she's on the ground. And of course we're very happy to have Chandra, who's part of the family here at the Habibie Center, one of our associate fellows, also the executive director of ASEAN Business Advisory Council, a very busy man. Yes?
I look busy.
You look... here I am trying to promote you, and I look busy. Thank you very much for being here, and we're looking forward to the discussions. Moderating the event, the discussions today is our very own Ibrahim Almuttaqi, who is the coordinator for our ASEAN Studies program. For those of you who are not familiar with the ASEAN Studies program, it's a program that was established by the Habibie Center in 2010. Off to a slightly slow start in the beginning, but for the past 1.5 years under Ibrahim's coordination and leadership, and with a great team behind him, some of them are here and some of them are traveling at the moment, we've had a series of discussions over the past 1.5 years, at least once a month. This month we have 3 on different issues, and we feel that this is very important to get the discussion about ASEAN out not just to people who talk about ASEAN already, but to people who to the public, so more people can talk about ASEAN. We're very happy as well. Was it last month or earlier this month? I can't remember now. The website was last month. Last month we also launched our website, where you can have, if you missed our past Talking ASEAN series, you can catch the reports and the presentations coming out of those Talking ASEANs, and also some of our publications on ASEAN. So for sure, the discussions today will also be summarized. Fina is already on her keyboard, ready to summarize discussions, and it will be put up on the website as well for you to read or for you to help distribute as well. So with that, I'd like to, I don't know how the launch is, we have no official symbol of anything, so I would just like to launch it by congratulating Kun Apichai and Yuyun. And for those of you who don't have the physical copy, you can also download it. I think we've provided the web link. It is not a spam link. It is happysociety.org. Yuyun can explain that later. The website where you can download it is actually www.happysociety.org. I kid you not. And it is a valid link where you can download this as well if you'd like to distribute it to other colleagues. Thank you for being here once again. I now pass the microphone to my colleague Ibrahim.
Thank you, Ms. Rahima, and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to today's Talking ASEAN, and welcome to the Habibie Center as well. This is a special edition of Talking ASEAN, as we are featuring the book launch and discussion of regional challenges and development in Southeast Asia, which was written by Queen Apichai and also Ms. Yuyun, who we're very delighted to have with us here. We really wanted to have this discussion today, so much so that, as Ms. Rahima said, we basically kidnapped Queen Apichai. We had a taxi waiting for him at the airport. We drove him straight here. We didn't even let him go to the hotel first, did we? So, and we also have Ms. Yuyun on my left, who is from Human Rights Working Group, and also Dr. Chandra from ASEAN Business Advisory Council, and also a very good friend of the Habibie Center. Perhaps to start off with, we'll start with Mr. Apichai Sunchindah. Just to read a little bit from his brief bio, he's been a development specialist over the past 3 decades. He's worked all over ASEAN, the region. I see that he's worked with the ASEAN Secretariat and also the ASEAN Foundation. Actually, he's being a bit humble here. He was actually the Executive Director, I believe, of the ASEAN Foundation. And he was previously a Bachelor of Science degree in Biology and also a Master of Science degree in Water Resources Management from the USA. So, I invite you first to speak. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ima, and also Ibrahim, for the nice, kind words, and also the offering the premises to have this, shall we say, Jakarta launch of the publication. Well, I mean, for me, Indonesia is, I always tell my good, nice friends here that this is my we consider it second home, because I lived here, as Ibrahim has indicated, well, this is already 2 decades ago, when I started with ASEAN Secretariat at that time, from 93 to 2000, where I headed the environment unit of the ASEAN Secretariat at the time. And then I returned again in 2005, this time with ASEAN Foundation. As Ibrahim also indicated, I was the Executive Director there for the term of 3 years. And then, so a total of 10 years, so I can say that at least I've spent a good part of my professional life, and interesting times too, both for Indonesia, for ASEAN, and the region. Anyway, on this particular publication, which just basically, actually, as Ima said, just hot out of the press because it just came out at the end of December, finally. Let me just tell you a little background to it, because sometimes if you read the title and then you read inside, maybe you may sense there's a little bit of a why is this, or why did we pick these 3 sort of priority areas? It's actually, I mean, if you look at the acknowledgement part, we were acknowledging the Swedish government actually, because this actually is a product of the Swedish government Development Cooperation Agency, or SIDA, wanted to do a strategy, a regional strategy, for the next couple of years. Okay? They had one already for the last couple of years. And now, with ASEAN moving to 2015 and other things, and also in line with their cycle, they decided that they would like to get sort of an external expert's view on what the region's development challenges are, and what are some of the opportunities for Sweden to get involved. So this is actually the basis for this work. And actually, SIDA has already had certain priorities in mind. And this is what's reflected in this publication. Basically, human rights, democracy, women's gender and women's empowerment, and then environment and climate change. And then they say, all right, the 3 of us, each are sort of specialists in those 3 fields, to think and to come up with some recommendations and suggestions and and also observations on what's the situation and what are the challenges, and therefore how Sweden should respond. I mean, that report, of course, has already been submitted back in the middle of last year, and then we were asking whether we could publish the result, because we thought that that may have some usefulness to the wider public, people like yourselves. And so they agreed, and although at first we were saying, do you want your SIDA logos? They said, no. You can publish, but you can just acknowledge, that's fine. Okay, we therefore settle at that. So basically, maybe I'll just, so we have 3 authors, and coming back to how the Happy Society came up, because Dr. Sawalak, who is one of the authors, she's actually a faculty member at one of the universities in Thailand, Rangsit University. But on the side, she's also the organized outfit called the Happiness Society in Thailand. And as you know, you are, let's say, familiar with Bhutan, who has coined this concept of gross national happiness. So it's now also getting a little bit more attention. Although she herself is not, just a promoter of just Bhutan's sort of development concept, but something related to that. Especially in Thailand too, we also have, for example, there's this the king's sufficiency economy kind of philosophy or concept, which somehow also relates to this kind of happy society. So that explains why the Happy Society, because the website, she has the website. Neither Yuyun and I we do. So all right, so that's why it's there. Okay, and moving on into the the first slide. We just thought we'd take a note, reference from, in this case, Mary Robinson, who was the former UN High Commissioner for Human Rights. And basically, this is what she said, and we thought it ties up very well what the 3 themes that we are touching on. Okay. In other words, these 3 are interlinked, intertwined. One cannot sort of do one without the other. Okay? Yeah, next. Okay. What are some of the overall development trends? I mean, Southeast Asia, let's say for the past 2 decades, have certainly generated quite a lot of economic development and growth. All right. I mean, compared over the time series, especially now with over the last couple of years when Europe and North America, especially US and also Japan and so forth, are not doing well. I think the whatever economic growth that Southeast Asian countries have are actually quite excellent in that comparison. Okay, but overall also there's a general trend of up. The curve is going up. But on the other hand, there's always the other side of the story. The poverty and the gaps are still, although declining, but there's also still there. I believe the figures you can look at it in the publication, but there's still quite a substantial number of people in Southeast Asia that are still below the poverty line. And also the other complicating factor is there's also rising inequality in many of the countries. Yeah? So I think this is something that's also worrying. I guess if you're in the development circle, I think the past year you have this Thomas Piketty, right? Who is a French economist who came out with this book about capital in the 21st century. And basically he's addressing on the issue of inequality. Well, of course, he's looking at it more in the Western world, specifically America and Europe. But I think we also have it here, all right? And therefore, when we talk about that, okay, then I guess you're all familiar with the Millennium Development Goals, MDGs, which, by the way, also has a timeline of 2015 this year, just as ASEAN also has a timeline for its own community cooperation framework. Well, MDG targets, yeah, by and large, it's improving, but on some, like for example, environment, it's actually not doing quite well yet, right? Social Progress Index, that's another sort of index. There's so many indices, HDI, and this one is SPI. Of course, it looks a little bit more broader in terms of health, education, livelihood, welfare, and all that. But sometimes just to look at a particular one may be a bit biased or skewed. Yeah, so you want to look at it a little bit more balanced. And in this case, even though economic indicators are good, but the social one may not be so. And there's also variations across countries. All right? And then, of course, it goes without saying that there's a lot of changes going on, including urbanization, modernization. I think they are saying, countries in this part of the world will soon be, more than half will be urbanized, not too long in the future. So how does one, and that comes with both positive and negative implications and repercussions. Okay, maybe next. Okay. So the chapter, the format is that we present what is the trend, and then we present what are the challenges and responses. So basically, inequality is still an issue, right? And it will continue to be one, I think, in the foreseeable future. And we need to deal with it, somehow. And I think ASEAN is trying to deal with it. They have, for example, trying to bridge the gap, narrow the development gap between the richer and poorer countries. But I think there's still much more to be done. Now, everybody, I guess, I hope, is familiar with AEC, the ASEAN Economic Community. Sometimes I feel that at the expense of the other two, there are actually three pillars in ASEAN community: political security, economic, and social cultural. But in some places or some situations, AEC seems to be the only one that people know about or has been highly publicized. I mean, nothing wrong with that, but it's just that it's not gives a balanced picture. Okay, and one needs to make sure that one has the correct understanding and give the due attention to each of them. So I'm sure Alex can talk to you more about that, and I'm sure he will. In terms of AEC, there are again both some very notable achievements. The tariffs have more or less all come down to almost zero, if not already zero. So that is the good part. But the downside is that there's still a lot of other non-tariff barriers. The inequality, the gap, is still big. So, one needs to also address those. And I think, well, ASEAN does have plans, does have programs, but maybe one needs to be to make sure that they're a bit more focused, more addressing the critical shortcomings that we have. There's of course always a tussle between regional and national. Yeah, I mean ASEAN is basically a grouping of 10 nation states. So what is of the interest priority for each particular country may not be necessarily the one for ASEAN, and vice versa. But nevertheless, they all have come together. I mean, all these plans promulgated by ASEAN have all gone to a consensus. ASEAN uses a consensus kind of decision making. So basically, they all have nodded and agreed to it. But I think the test, or the critical test, just like in the case of AEC, is it's fine to have all the agreements, but the real test is how far you can actually translate that into your own national legislation, because oftentimes you need to also change your own laws, right? I mean, those of you from Europe would know very well, when you join the EU, many things would have to be aligned to whatever Brussels say. And I was telling one other participant here that the difference between Brussels and Jakarta, in this case ASEAN, is that Brussels has both the clout and the money to back up what it wants to do, right? It has a lot of authority, it has a lot of funds, whereas ASEAN Secretariat is a much more poorer kind of comparison sort of entity. But anyway, let's talk about the reality that ASEAN, that's the way ASEAN is. Okay, and that's one of the major differences. But anyway, this reconciliation between regional and national is an ongoing. Sometimes it's also quite contested or controversial, but other times a bit easier, depending on the issue. And nevertheless, I think it's also important to make sure that we have the address, let's say even in AEC. It's not that everybody wins. Yeah? Somebody would lose out. So who are these people? Where are they? When would they lose out? Or what effects would come into the picture? I mean, these are all the the finer details that one needs to address, and therefore we need to have social protection, social investment to make sure that they don't drop off. In other words, not from the floor. We want, as now I think the new slogan in the UN is that to leave nobody behind. So therefore we need to make sure we have social safety nets to make sure they don't fall through, okay? Or to lift them up if they're already falling down. And then finally, we're talking about region, Southeast Asia, ASEAN. So we need to have, of course, regional development approaches, maybe some innovative, ideas and things, and also to need to have more inclusive and sustainable. I think that's some of the key words these days. Okay, next. Okay, then the second topic in our sort of publication is on gender, which is an important sort of a cross-cutting. I'm sure all of you would agree. Again, in the ASEAN, the picture is that it's also mixed. Some progress, certainly, in terms of especially to education, to health, and some of the economic, job employment and so forth. Although there's still a lot to be done. Having said that, interestingly, like for example, on the political participation of women, somehow the socialist countries seems to stand out. At least the statistics seems to show, yeah. Partly maybe because of their unique, their governing system or whatever. But that doesn't necessarily translate into, full participation in the other areas. So especially obviously on environment and so forth. So there's still a need to level the playing field in a sense for gender, yeah. Some spots may be bright, other spots are actually down. Low-income countries, for example, what we mean by that is like Cambodia, Laos, Myanmar, Vietnam, which are poorer, and the newcomers, they tend to have, of course, as expected, higher inequality. Yeah? The access, the opportunity is just not quite there yet. But we're working on it, or ASEAN is working on it, and we hope that this would narrow or be bridged soon. But then we should not forget that there are also some very vulnerable or marginalized sectors, especially informal migrant workers, minorities. I'm sure you know about human trafficking here and there, smuggling and what have you. And then also particularly when we have crises like natural disasters or environmental disasters, then these people get really sort of shortchanged. Yeah? So we need to also make sure we put them on the radar. Next. Okay. Next. Okay, what challenges, responses? The women at risk, whoever they are, and whatever stage, we need to make sure that they are well taken care of, or at least adequately taken care of, so that we make sure that we are upholding their basic fundamental rights. Yeah, I mean which is also enshrined in our ASEAN Charter, by the way. So we better make sure that it stays and it's upheld. And also not to mention the need for their development and also for their protection. Of course, we also need to increase their level of participation all the way from policy, high level, down to the grassroots or whatever, at all levels, and including to their livelihoods and their surroundings, their environment, and their overall well-being. Because after all, they also play a very important role. And I guess finally we need to also make sure that we mainstream gender, which I guess by and large, journalists have been accepted that this is a cross-cutting area. And we also have both from the regional, to the sub-regional, to regional, to the global. And so I think everybody is on it, except that we need to perhaps synchronize and make sure we are coordinated, well coordinated on some of these. Okay, next. Okay, this one, I don't know, maybe I'm sure this is actually Yuyun's topic, but maybe I'll skip this, so I'll let her, I will steal her thunder. Otherwise you say, why am I here? So can you skip? Go to the, Okay, I just move on to the cross-cutting issues. Because after all, as if you remember the first slide, was Mary Robinson's quote, basically saying that all three are interrelated, and we need to treat them as one, in that sense, holistically. So, okay, that is the basic idea, and therefore we need to, how do we then, do that, mainstream that? I think basically, it all perhaps could be revolving around, the rights issues, rights-based, In other words, if we treat people as, as human beings, that they have born with certain, rights and of course also obligations, then we better make sure that those are protected, those are upheld, those are enhanced. Okay, and of course nowadays there are many. I'm sure many of you would also be much more. I can speak more on these human rights-based approaches. For example, now we have like a person like Mr. John Knox, right, who is actually a UN, shall we say, is it advisor or envoy or whatever? Special rapporteur.
Independent expert.
Yeah, independent expert on environment and rights and human rights. Okay, so you probably have another one for gender and rights and gender and environment, for example. Okay, so there will be many such, shall we say, combinations. Yeah, and of course it goes without saying, ASEAN itself also needs to make some changes and reform in its own sort of institution to address some of these cross-cutting, cross-sector issues. It's not easy because I think, normally, even from school, we are already divided or compartmentalized by science major or arts major, and then you can subdivide into, physics, chemistry, biology, and arts you can be economics, sociology, and law, or whatever, political science. And then when you go into university, it's still there, right? The same kind of pillars, shall we say, what I call. And then you go into public service. The government is also structured, right? Department of Social Welfare, Department of Environment, Ministry of Energy, Ministry of this or that, So it's never sort of a cross-cutting ministry, except maybe for Indonesia where you have a coordinating minister, But then it's just a coordinating outfit to me, It's not a ministry per se. So anyway, what I'm saying is that we always seem to, somehow look at things hierarchically or vertically, whereas here we're talking about a horizontal, right? Transect. Right? We need to look at across. I was just telling also the speaker the other day, just now, one of the other persons in the room, that I mean, just like, compared to looking at this room, I mean, you see pillars, right? It's quite obvious. But do you know that there are actually also beams? Otherwise the building will collapse, right? But you don't see the beams very often. But it doesn't mean that it's not important. It's very important. If you only have pillars, you only have monuments, right? Monuments, you only have pillars left. The thing have collapsed. So you want to have a living building, living institution, then you need to make sure that you have both vertical and horizontal. Okay, next. Okay, then moving on to the environment trends. Again, there are both pluses and minuses. Of course, here we're talking about more of the minuses because of the, especially now, Southeast Asian region where rapid economic growth, development has certainly depleted or deteriorated the natural resources capital, and then it deteriorated the environment, degrading the environment. Of course, nowadays one cannot neglect climate change and what the greenhouse gases do. Although I think ASEAN, the statistics for ASEAN countries is still relatively small compared to some of the other ones around the world, but it's rising quite rapidly. And so I think there should be a concerted effort to try to address this. Otherwise, we'll be sort of shooting over the roof. And then, of course, there are also other relating to this carbon footprints. Is increasing. Of course, that has its own repercussions. And then, of course, it also affects the climate, it affects the storms and the rain or the drought or whatever. So it makes it even more disastrous in that sense. Yeah? So we need to also try to see how we're going to address the remedial part, although the prevention part is also equally important. Okay. Next. Okay. Some of the other, I think, many of you probably know already on some of these issues, but I just thought that we highlight them since it was mentioned in our report. Basically, not just land, but also sea or marine base. Yeah, we also have problems, and of course, for those of you who are in the environment, transboundary haze pollution is also one of the key, troubling areas for ASEAN. Although we have an agreement, finally. I understand Indonesia Parliament has agreed to ratify, although I just checked to see whether the instruments have been deposited. I haven't heard an answer yet. so we are still awaiting if it's not already there. We hope soon. Yeah? So then that means everybody's on board, and hopefully that would then engender more solid and cooperation to move forward, okay, to address this crucial, very critical issue. Of course, it's not just the air, but the water too. Of course, in this case, the Mekong River Basin, which is in the main, continental Southeast Asia now, where it's a shared river among several ASEAN countries and together with China in this case. We also have similar challenges water management. And it also goes without saying, it couples with our increasing urbanization, modernization, there's increasing material consumption, energy consumption, resource consumption. Okay. Right. So what do we do? Okay, as I mentioned, haze, we actually have an agreement on paper at least, which was already what, 12 now into 13 years old. Was agreed and signed in 2002. Actually came into force in 2003. It actually just required 6 ratifications, and so we got that in 2003. But then today, hopefully now we finally have all on board, and then we can hopefully give it a little bit further push, and I think it's a very critical one. By the way, it's not just, ASEAN is also very diverse and has geographically and climatically and what have you. And we have actually 2 sort of distinct ecological, shall we say, regimes, right? You have the southern sort of, meaning Malaysia, Brunei, Indonesia, Philippines, are basically archipelagic, right? More or less, by and large. In other words, they are island states, island communities. Whereas you move further north, then you basically come into mainland or continental Southeast Asia, like Myanmar, Thailand, Cambodia, Laos, and Vietnam, which are connected, by land and by water, actually, in the case of Mekong. So you have both, different sort of systems, different but shared certain similarities, and where we need to have a more regional and integrated approach. Okay, and then as we were saying, sustainable carbon production, I think that goes without saying that it's important, because we cannot just go on eating up all the natural resource capital. In fact, if you believe the statistics from the World Wildlife Fund, they already say we already need 1 1/3 Earth to sustain the amount of daily material and other needs and consumption that we're doing now. So we're already over, in other words, by 1/3, and it could also rise quite rapidly, especially with new emerging countries following this trend. Okay, so we need to really address this seriously. Okay, forestry, biodiversity, wildlife. I think you more or less probably know that these are also under threat. And also for climate change, we actually ASEAN also actually has some plans and actions. But I think the real test is, as usual, to see how well it works, and how effective it works, and how timely it's implemented. Okay, thanks. Okay, then I'm moving on to some figures, because GIDA is a sort of we call it a donor entity. So we're always interested in what kind of flows, financial and otherwise. Here we're talking about foreign direct investments into all the 10 ASEAN countries, based on, by the way, ASEAN statistics. It's all taken from ASEAN Secretariat charts and publications. I mean, you see an increasing trend. And this is of course, this is what ASEAN likes to showcase and say, hey, we are an attractive place, destination, and so forth. Okay. But you notice that, in the cumulative, which is the last column, I mean, by and large, the CLMV countries are still lagging behind. Yeah. Although you would hope that at some stage, that more investment should go into helping the poorer countries, right? The richer countries actually don't need that much anymore. They can go on their own. But anyway, it will take time. Okay. Next slide. This is just a continuation, but breaking down by the source country of giving the investment to the different ASEAN countries. Okay. I think by and large you can see. I think European Union and all the European countries, and of course the USA and Australia are all very large. Okay, next. Okay. We're talking about development cooperation, therefore we also need to talk about this ODA, or Official Development Assistance, and this is how it looks. Of course, here you get the sort of the desirable picture that most of it goes to the needy countries, Cambodia, Indonesia, Myanmar, starting to increase. And actually you have a negative figure for Thailand, which is also interesting, but which is also expected. Thailand now is actually a net donor than a recipient. Okay, Thailand has graduated in terms of the development paradigm. Okay, the next slide. Okay, just to show you, because Sida was saying, okay, who are some of the major players, catalysts or whatever that we can work with, and so we gave them a whole list. Of course, you don't need to know all of them. Of course, if you want to know, we can tell you who they are. But it's usually the usual suspects. If you're in the development circles, from all the way from global organizations to regional ones, to the academic, to the foundations, corporate sector, very important because I think as the FDI figure shows, there's even more private funds going into countries than the government public funds. And of course, because we are saying all the major stakeholders, the media, parliaments, and issue groups or whatever, and of course, actually the last one, because we are catering to the Scandinavian or Nordic audience. Okay, so I'll stop there. That's my part, and then I think maybe you can take over. Fill in the missing blanks.
Thank you, Apichai, for the very comprehensive presentation, where you very succinctly described the gender inequality issues and environmental impact of the main players. You mentioned on your first slide about the interlinkages between the environmental impact, gender issues, and human rights. So we're delighted to have probably the expert on human rights in ASEAN, Ms. Yuyun Wahyuningrum, who is the Senior Advisor on ASEAN and Human Rights at the Human Rights Working Group. So I'll give the floor to you for your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ibrahim. I have the PowerPoint presentation as well. Thank you very much, Ima, and thank you very much for Habibie Center for hosting this lunch. So since Apichai has explained almost everything, so it left me on the democracy and human rights. Initially, I wanted to put the gender issue there, but it's already covered. So I just highlight some of the issues in relation of democracy and human rights. So these are some of the trend challenges and development in democracy and human rights, which apparently not that too shiny. Human rights remains a sensitive issue in Southeast Asia, even though the ASEAN Intergovernmental Commission on Human Rights has been established for the last 5 years, but it is still very sensitive to be discussed in the region and in certain countries. Let me start from the top. The greatest stumbling block in Southeast Asia is widespread impunity. It's a trend in all ASEAN countries, including Indonesia. And also the conflict continued to be happen, lack of political will and capacity to deliver the development result in the countries. Democracy has not yet become a strong institution in Southeast Asia. I will explain later on in this part. And the recent Thai military coup also warrant the caution and perhaps even a bit skepticism that democracy is not, in Southeast Asia, not necessarily irreversible. It's going back and forth all the time. That's also make us in Indonesia very cautious that perhaps we are going to go back in zero. But I think civil society has been very active and to try to prevent that happening in Indonesia, and I saw also the trend in Philippines. The Southeast Asia regional approach to human rights continue to be state-centric. Everything related to human rights always in the hand of governments rather than the people. HRWG still continue to promote, highlight on promotion rather than protection. The current process of the reviewing of the term of reference of HRWG has not been moving from where they were in 2014. The absence of alternative mechanism within the intergovernmental structure limit the option for people to seek for justice, especially in human rights, cross-border human rights violations. And next, so these are the table that we gathered from Freedom House until 2014. So it's actually has 10 years development in terms of freedom of political and civil rights. As you can see, almost all countries have steady index, except Indonesia started with partly free in 2005 and become free until 2014, partly free. So the report on 2014 is a reflection of 2013 situation. That's according to the Freedom House. So we are going to see what Freedom House say about democracy in Indonesia on 2014, maybe this year. Almost all countries started from partly free and end up in 2014 as partly free. Started from not free in the end in 2014, still not free. So we can see the fluctuation is very rare. It means the progress is very slow in Southeast Asia in terms of freedom, civil rights and political rights. Next, please. Okay, we skip this. So the books mention some of the recommendations looking at the challenges and trends we have so far in terms of democracy and human rights. The first one is democracy decline requires promotion of multiple strategies. So when we are looking at the ASEAN political security community, for instance, actually it has a clue how to promote democracy in ASEAN. It is the ASEAN political security community does not suggest to impose democracy, but rather to promote democracy from different channels. One of the channels that has been mentioned by the blueprint is through the HRWG, through the ASEAN Intergovernmental Commission on Human Rights, and through the ASEAN Institute for Peace and Reconciliation. The question is whether these two institutions are effective to promote democracy. First, HRWG has been quite closed in terms of operating. Civil society cannot access, civil society cannot be present in their work. Sometime ICHR invited civil society to join, to contribute some of the inputs in their work, like in the ASEAN Human Rights Declaration process of drafting, but still, civil society had difficult time to understand what is actually happening with the ICHR, because the information is very limited and has been controlled, what to share and not, or what not to share. IPER, again, the basic question is whether it is effective to promote democracy through the ASEAN Institute for Peace and Reconciliation. The basic assumption is because the IPER is the government's body, the intergovernmental body. Even though the executive director can come from the professional, but it is not there yet, so we do not have the evidence to what extent this body would support and would have the promotion of democracy in Southeast Asia. But judging from the composition of the governing body and advisory body of the ASEAN Institute for Peace and Reconciliation, some civil society felt a doubt to use the IPER as a vehicle to promote democracy. On the other hand, as a democracy, as the name, democracy, ASEAN doesn't have an institute or mechanism to promote democracy itself. So again, I think in terms of promoting democracy, there is no straightforward channel in ASEAN in improving democracy. In one of the articles I wrote for Jakarta Post in November, my suggestion was through national development of democracy. So it's through bilateral cooperation, for instance, Indonesia with Myanmar, Indonesia with other countries. So I think it would be better to exchange this kind of best practices between the 2 or 3 countries, rather than using the regional institution as entry point. Ineffective regional human rights system require alternative human rights protection responses. What we have been witnessing so far since ICHR was established in 2009, ICHR was not equipped with the mechanism to solve the problem. ICHR does not have mechanism to have a country visit. ICHR doesn't have a mechanism to ask questions to the country. However, there has been a number of improvement in ICHR. So for instance, Indonesian government in June 2013 introduced the mechanism similar like UPR, the Universal Periodic Review. Indonesian government invited all ICHR representatives coming from 10 countries coming to Jakarta, and Indonesian government reported on what is happening in Indonesia so far. So surprisingly, ICHR representatives from different countries asked a lot of questions, including what happened in Papua, what happened in Sharia law in Aceh, how Indonesia choose to separate between military and police in the process of democratization in 1998, and a lot of questions. And what I've been informed that Indonesian government was not that defensive, so they answer all the questions and invite the cooperation with ICHR how to move forward from this point. Some of the responses I get from the National Commission for Human Rights, for instance, who attended that meeting, said that kind of forum was rather better compared with the UPR in Geneva level, because in Universal Periodic Review, people try to be quite diplomatic and try to find ways how to comment the human rights situation without offending the country, etc. But in June 2013, the condition, the situation was rather constructive, and it was very good ambience for discussion. Unfortunately, there was no follow-up from the request from Indonesian government to have a cooperation between Indonesia and ICHR further. In 2014, Thailand governments follow that kind of practice, but they only want to report to ICHR in relation to trafficking and migrant workers issues, not others. So we saw there is improvement, but it really depends on the countries, depend on the voluntarily of the countries, a member of ASEAN. At the same time, we also saw another development in the region, like the National Human Rights Commission in Thailand was able to investigate cases, human rights abuses in foreign soil, which is in Cambodia, because of the human rights violation committed by Thai companies. So we see this possible happen in the region. The commissioner from the National Human Rights Commission of Thailand brought back the cases and questioned these Thai companies on their wrongdoing in Cambodia. At the moment, the commissioners from the same commission from Thailand is investigating the cases, human rights violation committed by Thai companies in Myanmar. So we see this happening, and this is possible. While ICHR still find out how they can do this, what we are trying to see to what extent the National Human Rights Commission in Indonesia, for instance, will be able to investigate something happening on human rights violation committed by Indonesian companies, for instance, in foreign soil. We have not been seeing that happening so far, but we take a note that what had been organized and conducted by the Thai National Human Rights Institution is something that we can consider as a good practice. The other example that we consider as an alternative human rights protection is the role of the ASEAN Parliamentarian for Human Rights. The parliamentarian members from Indonesia, from Philippines, and from Malaysia went to Vientiane in Laos to find the answer on the case of the missing of Sombat Sompong. And we did not think that can be happen in this region, but this parliamentarian managed to bring the information back to the people, because a lot of people from Southeast Asian countries ask the same question: where is Sombat after 15 December 2012? So these evidence, these events convince us that we need alternative mechanisms apart of the ICHR. We need to strengthen ICHR, of course, but again, we need to find ways to solve the problems of human rights in Southeast Asia. And I think that's the two striking recommendation that the book has been suggested so far. And I think I would like to stop there. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Yuyun, for the very detailed explanation on the human rights and democracy situation in ASEAN. Last but not least, we turn to Ms. Alex, who maybe as the Executive Director of ASEAN-BAC might like to explain what ASEAN is doing to address some of these issues. Sorry to be on the spot.
Okay, thank you, Ibrahim. Good afternoon. Firstly, of course, Happy New Year to you all. And also congratulations to Apichai and Yuyun for the, well, I think it's very nicely done work, which I think covered a lot of issues that is very relevant to today. What I'm going to do today, I think really just to comment, not so much on the book, but perhaps on the whole issues that we are trying to tackle. I think again this is a relatively very good book, and so I don't think I have the authority to to give further comment on that. So I will just I think discuss several key issues. Basically, what I'm trying to do is firstly to try to understand first again what is it that we mean, what we understand by development, and of course secondly, and how this whole issue is being being interpreted in regional context, especially in Southeast Asia, and thirdly, I would also like to pose the question whether it is still feasible for us to adopt such a development mindset. And lastly, perhaps I propose some of the key opportunities from the development from the development opportunities of ASEAN, or whether ASEAN has any. And actually, the book that is written by Apichai Sunchindah and Yuyun is actually very much in line to what I had written earlier on back in 2009. In fact, at the time I wrote a piece on ASEAN as a development-oriented organization. There I tried to argue actually, well, again, whether or not ASEAN is actually development can be considered as a development oriented organization. After all, I think the issue of development has been a core principle, core aspiration of ASEAN, which is not very unique to ASEAN. I think a lot of many other regional organizations in the world is also doing the same. So, but by and large, development, as we know it, is a very highly contested concept, and inherently very complex and ambiguous concept. I'm not going to dwell on the different interpretation of different theory about development, but I think over the years it has been brought down. I think especially in recent year to a quite limited meaning, in the sense that very focused on poverty reduction, and recently, of course, on the question of how countries can achieve the Millennium Development Goals. Yeah. Of course, there are also a school of thought within postmodernism, as I understand it, that try to understand development as a discourse that shapes and frames reality. Development, regionalism as a development tool, is not necessarily new. I think it has also been brought up back in the 70s, 80s, especially in light of the mushrooming of regional integration all over the world, especially not only in the northern part of the hemisphere, but also mostly many among the LDCs and also the developing countries in Africa, lesser part in Asia, because there we only see like a couple of them, like ASEAN, and perhaps even SAARC was also only very recently, mostly in Latin America and in Africa. But at the time, actually, a lot of the I think, as I understand it, a lot of the experts actually thought that regionalism was actually seen as a failure as far as development is concerned, partly because it is often seen as a scheme which is imposed by external pressure, by external powers, and also by and large there are inheritance of colonial schemes. So, but how is development actually interpreted in ASEAN, in ASEAN context? Well, I think over the years, ASEAN, the development of development discourse in ASEAN has been transformed quite significantly. Of course, this is also a lot of them actually are also adjusted with the global in the context of the global changes as well. And of course, interestingly, I think since the early 90s, the development context in ASEAN has been geared toward more like a openness, market-oriented development characteristic, if you will, and which is a lot of it actually is shaped by economic openness. Actually, the late one of the quite distinguished ASEAN scholars, the late Hadi Susastro, once referred to ASEAN as an outward-looking regional integration. Of course, I think it is not necessarily a bad thing having a market-oriented approach to development. Precisely because of it, I think the book has actually shown. Also, there are some statistics about like how ASEAN, the region, has actually been able to actually reduce poverty quite significantly. Yeah? I don't remember the figure, but you can check in the book. And there are also a lot of other improvement that has been reached in the region, including the economic growth and so on and so forth. But is it still feasible? Is it still feasible today? But I guess it's really quite a relative question, really. But of course, if you look at the global financial crisis until today, I think this also shows that how vulnerable market approach to development. Now, despite all this, despite all the achievement that ASEAN has managed to attain from its market-oriented development, as I said before, it was able to increase to improve economic growth. It has been able to actually reduce poverty. I think, of course, as the paper also clearly states that the income gap is increasingly getting wider, and there is also quite significant environmental degradation as a result of extensive economic industrialization throughout the region, and of course gender inequality has not necessarily been improved. Despite the fact actually a lot of the Southeast Asian most influential people actually women. We are always talking about gender mainstreaming and so on and so forth. It has always been. No, I mean a lot. I mean. Well, I mean, I'm working. Before I was working, look at a lot of Indonesian economists who are actually, involved in the policy making. Before even, Indonesian cabinet today actually, half of it actually women.
No, only 8.
Oh, sorry, 8. Yeah, but anyway, there are a lot. And then before some of the most Indonesian economists actually quite sitting in a very quite influential position, like from finance minister, trade minister, and so on and so forth. They are women, but they are taking a role which is that actually give them the chance to actually improve gender mainstreaming. But I think by and large they were unable to actually mainstream gender issues in their respective field. So that's my point. So that's the situation. So what I'm saying is that maybe of course again, market-oriented development perspective is not necessarily a bad thing. But of course, and actually there is actually some opportunities that can be benefited from can be gained from this approach. But regardless of what development paths that ASEAN take, whether market-oriented or more more state-driven approach and so on and so forth, I think that's not really the question. But I think what is needed is more like an issue of consistency, and also what Apichai earlier said. It was a question about how to actually promote, reform within the ASEAN institution itself, especially with regard to for me at least, also the question about the reform on the non-interference approach in ASEAN, which needs to be, a reform. I think this is the key stumbling block to many of the development progress for ASEAN. And last and least, of course, the political will. Because we have this political will, none of this reform can be, of course, undertaken. So with that, I think I will just conclude my what I would like to share. with you, and perhaps just a couple of questions actually to the two authors. Hang on, if I can find again my notes now. So yeah, about I think Kun Apichai, you mentioned, I think the paper was mentioning about this importance of the cross-sectoral issue, yeah. So coordination and issue. But of course, you would agree, I guess, with me when I say that, of course, it's not only cross-sectoral but also cross-pillar coordination. But then again, you know, given as you fully aware, given the limited resources the ASEAN has, or whatever their limitation are, how do you think that this can be resolved? I think this is quite. I mean, the issue of coordination has always been mentioned by many expert observers, alike. But how do we move on from our present state of cooperation? And then perhaps on the I have a question about human rights, Yuyun. You were saying that, you know, HR cannot do this, you cannot do that because of A, B, C, D, F, G. If you were to be appointed as the next HR for Indonesia, what will you do then? So, just out of curiosity, because if you, I mean, like, I guess you have been very focal commentator of HR, you know. So I thought it would be prudent for us to know what you thought about how to reform HR. Thank you. So thank you, Ibrahim.
Thank you, Mas Alex. Since he's already kicked off the Q&A session, I'd like to maybe take 2 or 3 more questions from the floor. Please state your name and your affiliation, and as usual, be passing the mic.
Thank you for your opportunity. My name is Ferry. I'm journalism from Okezan.com. Okay, I want to ask a question that ASEAN is very good in economic and social cooperation, but there is very difficult to make cooperation in politics and security. You know that Spratly Island and South China Sea. When the dispute in Spratly Island, Philippines critiques the ASEAN that ASEAN is not to coordinate the Asian member against China. So Spratly Island is the issue, yes. So how to ASEAN to make to strong the cooperation in security cooperation? Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, maybe Kun Apichai, you can start with addressing Masalah's question and also going from the floor.
Okay. On the I mean, as I said, you know, using the analogy, cross-cutting means cross. The thing is that, you know, we are often, shall we say, conditioned to look this way. So we are not conditioned to look this way. You know what I mean? You have to invert yourself or whatever, you know, to look that way. But it doesn't mean that it cannot be done. You know, I mean, I guess basically one just needs to have to open oneself to allow alternative ways of looking at things, alternative paradigms, if you will. So I think. Yeah, I mean, I guess basically one would have to boil down to maybe changing the way the modus operandi, yeah? In other words, if you traditionally do things like this, maybe you need to be a little bit more open and receptive to other ways of approaching things. Yeah? So I think with that, yeah? In other words, one has to have an open mind, open heart too, I guess, well, I mean, that's basically reconciliation, no? I mean, when you think about it, basically, simply, yeah? That you need to see the things from the other person's shoes, or the other person's point of view. Okay? So if you can do that, and the other person also likewise reciprocates, and then you have a fairly good, I think, chance that these kind of issues can be resolved. I mean, basically, I think in reality, if you have an issue that's cross-cutting, I think normally, whether it's in the ministry or in the university department, then you have to just call the concerned stakeholder to sit down and talk, dialogue, and try to reason it out, right? I mean, that's the usual approach. So I think it's more or less the same here. You just have to then be open and then get the views from the other side and try to understand why that person is seeing it that way, or whether there's on its merits, in other words, whether there is some merit worthwhile to look at it that way, and vice versa. I mean, it is difficult. Sometimes it's, we ourselves, like, we are human beings. We all also have our own set of mindsets, certain way fixed on certain things or routine or whatever. So it's not going to be easy, but it's not impossible. I think at least, in principle, that can be done, and it has been done, shown in some cases.
May I just sharpen my question, perhaps? When you've worked with ASEAN institutions, ASEAN organs, and ASEAN-related entities, in your experience, what do you think is stopping ASEAN from being able to use this coordination work, if you will?
Well, I mean, I'm not saying that ASEAN hasn't done. Yeah, I mean, I think certainly in many of these where it requires cooperation with other partners. For example, maybe disaster could be one good example. Yeah, because okay, I mean, the physical disaster itself, you require certain capabilities or certain competencies to address. Yeah. And I guess you need people like from, let's say, from the Red Cross type, or the Oxfam type, or World Vision or whatever. But then I guess sometimes, initially, for example, disaster, what do you call this, where you have to immediately go in. Let's say the typhoon hit, the earthquake hit, there's a tremendous, casualties, some of the losses of property life. You need to mobilize. Usually, I think it's the military that has that kind of resources and personnel. Yeah, they have the equipment, they have the heavy equipment, they have the personnel that can sort of basically parachute in and do something. Whereas normally government agencies, especially in this part of the world, are very short-handed in that regard, and also in terms of capacity and capabilities. So you have to bring in maybe the military and of course the civilian, disaster people, and then once it reaches a certain stage, then you have to bring in the developmental side to go in to rehabilitate, to there's water supply, whether it's health or whatever, education, that kind of thing. So and then post reconstruction. So depending on the stage of the event and the issue. So I think that is perhaps one example which one can look at. I'm not a sort of a political or geopolitical expert, but just to answer your question from my point of view, again, it is a matter of coming to some kind of reconciliation and understanding. Of course, Philippines has its own views, and so does Vietnam, so does Indonesia, so does Thailand, so does Laos, which never borders the South China Sea. Okay, but it doesn't mean they cannot have a view. So I think maybe where it sort of broke down a bit, if you are referring to the 2012 incident, is that somehow this consensus sort of approach somehow sort of fizzled out or whatever, or it was not practiced to the full. Maybe you can interpret it that way too, right? Certain countries just decided to just make their stand and that's it, okay? And no negotiation, no compromise. Whereas I think that is not the ASEAN way. And if you know what the ASEAN way is, they always try to work it out. Okay, there are problems, there are issues. It's not that they're not denying that, but then sometimes you need to have a coffee break or go out for an extended break or special retreat or something like that. I mean, there are ways to do it, and I think maybe that didn't really transpire very well. Okay, and that's my interpretation. I was not there at that forum even, so I don't know the dynamics of it. Or even from people I heard from inside, actually it was not the way the media portrayed it. Sometimes that's also going back to how outsiders, because they were not at the meeting, right? The media certainly, I'm sure, was not at witnessing the meeting, but they were reporting certain stories that came out, which could be right or could be wrong, or could be misinterpreted. Okay, so there are many sides to the story, basically. So one has to be a bit careful, when we do go about doing these kind of things. Okay, I hope that sort of, in a way, answers that.
What about you?
Thank you, Alex. If I were appointed, at least there are three.
When?
There are three things that I would like to address first. Number one is on independence of selection of the IT representative. What we have been seeing so far in the last 5 years, that having independent representative inside ITER, even though only 2, helps ITER a lot. So I cannot imagine if you don't have these 2 commissioners inside ITER. So the selection has to be participatory. So the commissioner should be answerable to the people, not necessarily to the state that appoint them. Second, number 2 is that within the next work plan of ITER in the next 5 years, ITER should prioritize in which area they want to be stronger. At the moment, ITER's work plan has been no focus at all. They are doing almost all issues, right to peace, harmonization of domestic laws on human rights, and many things was good, but there is no. But in the end of the day, we ask questions: what has been the impact of this all workshops, studies, and everything? So learning from what happened, the process of development of the Inter-American Commission of Human Rights, for instance, they focus on 3 things. What they want to see the body will develop, will be strengthened in the next 5-10 years, and put a lot of efforts in that one. So, for instance, ITER has launched the ASEAN Human Rights Declaration. Despite a lot of criticism, ITER has responsibility to promote this declaration, to use this declaration, and to put a mechanism to review this declaration, the implementation of the declaration. To what extent state respect the rights of life, for instance, or criminalize torture. ITER should be able to use this declaration as their diplomatic tools to other ASEAN institutions and ASEAN sectoral bodies. At the moment, ASEAN Committee on Migrant Workers discuss about the instrument on migrant workers in ASEAN. There have been a number of sensitive issues, so for instance, of freedom of association. So, ITER should be able to use the ASEAN Human Rights Declaration to challenge the committee why they have a disagreement on freedom of association, while in the ASEAN Human Rights Declaration this right have been guaranteed. So ITER should be able to use this declaration for their own purpose, and that's exactly the purpose of ITER, to promote and protect human rights. So I think ITER can start to establish their accountability mechanism from ASEAN Human Rights Declaration as the entry point. I've seen the example of CIM. This is the institute under the OIS, the Organization of American States, focus on women. So they started with the Bellum of Para, the Convention on Women. The first step, they as a follow-up from the convention, is to draft a questionnaire. As simple as that. A questionnaire asking each government member of the Organization of American States to what extent they have implemented the rights and their obligation as mentioned in the convention. The first year, no response. The second year, some responses from countries returned to CIM as a body. And now with all this, the body is already 80 years old. And now all member of Organization of American States, that's what I've been informed so far, has been disciplined in sending out the reports on the status of women as guaranteed in Belem do Pará. This kind of engagement started from the very simple initiative establishing a questionnaire, has been establishing a relationship between governments, the regional body, and civil society and other stakeholders. These also establish a cooperation. So again, ICHR can do more, can do many things with the declaration so far. And the last thing is introducing a new practices in promoting the norm of accountability. What we have been learning in engaging ASEAN is ASEAN and ICHR like to have practice first and institutionalize later. So we can see after about more than 40 years ASEAN had been established, they come up with the charter, with the legally binding document. In fact, in other regions, they started with a legally binding document first, and then they work together. But in ASEAN, we see it vice versa. They work together first, and then institutionalize it into a body as ASEAN Charter. So if this is the practice, so why don't we make all ASEAN member states feel familiar and comfortable with the practice, then at some point we can institutionalize this as a mechanism to protect human rights. So I think these three things can be doable to improve the performance of ICHR.
Thank you, Mbak Yuyun. I think we can take that as an unofficial campaign announcement. Do we have any more questions from the audience? Yes, please.
Yes, thank you very much. My name is Ibrahim Almuttaqi. I'm a researcher here. I would like to ask a question to Kun Apichai regarding to the ASEAN Agreement on Transborder Haze Pollutions. Well, I personally think that it is very domestic issues, since the haze occurs in Riau province and also some of the Kalimantan, some parts of Kalimantan. And the agreement itself has technically worked since 2006 and 2007 with the cooperation with Indonesia, between Indonesia and Singapore and Indonesia and Malaysia. So in the legal context, it's give justifications, but in the technical context, it is still the same. And I would like to ask for you your humble opinions. What do you think the measurement or instrument that can improve the cooperation within the context of the ASEAN Agreement on Transborder Haze Pollutions? Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. Do we have any more questions? Maybe I'd like to ask one question to each speaker as well. Maybe to Kun Apichai, you mentioned in your presentation about the need for institutional reforms in ASEAN to address cross-cutting issues. Maybe you could be specific about what type of reforms you'd like to see. Mbak Yuyun, you talked about the multiple strategies to promote democracy. We know that Indonesia has the Bali Democracy Forum, but there's been some questions in this country about how committed the new government, the current government, will be with the Bali Democracy Forum and whether it will continue it. And lastly, to Ms. Alex, yeah, because you mentioned about the changes in the development approach in ASEAN, how before it used to be, now it's gone towards open market orientated. But we know with the current government, there tends to be a more inward-looking Jokowinomics aspect to it. I was wondering maybe your comments on that. So thank you. Oh, yeah, sure.
Okay, just to answer the question on the haze issue. Okay, you're right that there have been some of these what we call sub-regional arrangements. What you mentioned, Indonesia, Singapore, Indonesia, and Malaysia. Yeah, I mean, in a way, that is sort of trying to bring it down a level. Yeah, because sometimes you talk at the big overall level, which is of course also important. You do not see the problem closely on the ground. And therefore, this is an attempt to sort of bring that down to the ground level. And, well, of course, you can debate whether that has been successful or not, but I think that has been done at least. Yeah, there's some activity on the ground. Singaporean, sending over, certain equipment or training people or whatever. Yeah, fighting together. Similarly with Malaysia and Indonesia. Now, don't forget that the haze is not, although this is the one that grabs the news, usually, well, partly because of the scale, and also it affects countries like Malaysia and Singapore who can be more vocal, yeah? And then, but we also have haze in our northern parts of ASEAN, meaning Thailand, Laos, Myanmar, and so forth, specifically. Especially if you're going, let's say, to the northern part of Thailand, from, let's say, February onwards to March or even April, you'll find sometimes very foggy or smoky days, hazy days. And even to the extent sometimes quite bad, that people actually try to escape by going to Bangkok, where you don't have the problem. What happens is that there's fires burning in that vicinity because there are also, where there's deforestation on the hills or to make clear the land, or planting crops or whatever. And what happens is that there's a lot of, because of the hills and valleys, sometimes the wind is not strong, it just stays there, it circulates there, and it's stuck, basically stagnant, sort of air, in a way. And more burning means making it worse. So, and there's a bit of also a transboundary effect in that part. Okay, so that's why now ASEAN has two wings under the ASEAN haze structure. There's the southern wing and the northern wing, so to speak, to address, that they are unique sort of occurrences. And usually these are also due to the seasonal. For example, right now the archipelagic area is entering the rainy season. Right now you have more rain, so you are less likely to have the fire and haze. And this is the drier season in the northern part, so we will be getting it soon. But then when we get the wet season in the north, then you have the dry season. So it's a sort of an alternating kind of thing. Yeah? But nevertheless, I think the whole idea is that we get together because there is a problem, there is a regional problem, and that's why we have this haze agreement. Okay, you can debate whether it's effective or not. In fact, I'm here this time for another exercise, which we are trying to basically try to brainstorm a bit. Especially now, ASEAN is moving into what is called the post-2015. 2015 is already here. Okay, there might be a bit of a hoo-ha on 2015 later on, throughout the year, but now we have to look post, the next 5 or 10 years. And I'm actually preparing a piece specifically on this transboundary haze pollution, whether we need to reframe it a little bit, because the way it is now framed under the ASEAN context is that, it's an environmental problem, which it is. I'm not denying that. You see the effects of that, okay? But you actually don't get too much to the source, because environment ministries most likely are not the source of the problem. You know what I mean? Or not under their authority. I mean, it's burning coming from agriculture, forestry lands, usually, right? Or even, so you have to get in the agriculture ministry, forestry minister, or even the interior minister, in some cases, who control the provincial and the local regions, right? So in that sense, we are not tackling it at the source. We are tackling it at the tail end. We're trying to say, we need to do something to improve the environment. Yeah, we do. That means the environment is getting very bad with all the smoke haze and all that. But in order to do that, you have to go back to land use law, you have to go back to land use practices, which has been centuries old. Fires is not a new, kind of a development. And then also, to me, those forestry and agriculture things are on the economic pillar of ASEAN, whereas environment is in the social cultural. But the source of the problem is economic, because it's driven by economic forces to clear land, to clear land cheaply, and then without, with impunity, basically you don't get penalized, which is then a governance issue, which is actually should be more handled by pillar 1, right? More on norms, shared norms. So to me, transboundary haze pollution is actually a cross-sector issue. If we really want to address it effectively and in a more holistic way. And this is my reframing approach. Yeah? We'll see how that goes. Okay? But just to answer your question, it has to be turned around a little bit. Yeah? What was the other one? On institutional reform. Okay, again, we need to see things, somewhat a little bit differently. But what I'm saying is that, ASEAN is no different from ministries or government or universities. They're all structured like that. Yeah? But there is that's why it's something I even joke with Larry Maramis, who is the director of the so-called cross-sectoral directorate, right? I say, what kind of cross-sectoral issues do you handle? Oh, I handle environment, I handle disaster, I handle culture, and what was the fourth one? I forgot. Anyway, quite 4 different distinctive sectoral divisions. But do you do any cross-cutting? Yeah, we occasionally do, but by and large, to me, I thought that if you have a cross-sectoral name in your directorate, in your division, or in your whatever organization, I would hope that you would do a little bit more of this crisscrossing. Yeah. As I said, it can be done. All you need is to pull the stakeholders together to sit down and work things out. Okay, we have this issue with you. Let's say on the haze, we have issue with forestry. We have issue with agriculture. We have also issue on the governance side, on the rules-based. Norm or even human rights in a way, because you're actually violating certain people's rights to clean air, something like that. So, if you look at it in that kind of context, then you see a somewhat different thing. Maybe I'd like to just, since you mentioned, I think you originally mentioned about your development, approach in ASEAN. You're also trying to get some answers, right? What ASEAN is doing. ASEAN has been doing development since basically day 1, if you want to count it that way. But what is interesting, looking forward, the ASEAN summit, the latest one in Naypyidaw, about 2 months ago, they issued what they call a post-2015 vision. And they listed a few of the sort of overarching elements. It's still very, very sort of bits and pieces and just sort of like a skeleton. But now the hard work begins for each of the councils, pillars, and the ministries and the sectoral bodies to flesh it out. But what's interesting was this one particular statement in this overarching element is to say, promote development of clear and measurable, quote, ASEAN development goals, unquote, to serve as ASEAN benchmark for key socio-economic issues. I've been asking my friends in ASEAN, what do you mean by the so-called ADGs? We have MDGs. Is this going to be following the line of MDG or whatever now they call SDGs, right? Sustainable Development Goals. That one, because the previous statement says we need to promote inclusive, sustainable, and equitable economic growth as well as sustainable development consistent with the UN's post-2015 development agenda. That was immediately before this ADG statement. So one can then also surmise that, maybe if you have no other model to follow, then you just follow the UN model. Okay? But then when you say ASEAN development goals, presumably you're implying that you want to be something distinctive from whatever the UN call their goals, SDG, MDG, whatever, right? But they put it quote unquote. So obviously this is still very early days. It still needs to be developed, to be evolved. It will be interesting to see what ASEAN comes up with eventually on their ADGs. Okay? Maybe hopefully that can answer a little bit of that. But I think he has a question to you. So.
Can I also answer the institutional?
Yeah, sure.
So I have a question on BDF, Bali Democracy Forum, and the response of Jokowi's administration, but I would like to also talk about the institutional reform in ASEAN. Before leaving the office, Dr. Surin Petsuan, the former Secretary General, originally from Thailand, come up with the documents called ASEAN Challenge. It has a lot of assessment and observation of Dr. Surin Petsuan on how ASEAN Secretariat and ASEAN organs can work more effectively in the future, responding to the need of the ASEAN community. That document has been responded by a number of member states, like Malaysia, Brunei Darussalam, Singapore, and others. And they would like to see more of coordination, rather not only in ASEAN Secretariat, but also all the councils within the ASEAN community and the structure of ASEAN community as mentioned in the ASEAN Charter. So based on this, so the ball rolling, and then ASEAN leaders established the Halal Task Force member, which Pak Ngurah Swajaya was the member. This Halal Task Force has worked for 1 year, and they have submitted the reports to the summit in November summit in Naypyidaw last year. And that summit come up with a new document on how ASEAN want to move forward. ASEAN has adopted the Declaration on Strengthening the ASEAN Secretariat and Reviewing the ASEAN Organ. So I think this is another roadmap of how institutions will be reformed within this regional body. We were informed by Indonesian member to the Halal Task Force that each council had been asked how they want the structure of ASEAN or their own body, and the ASEAN Secretariat has been asked how to restructure all the work based on the needs and based on the burden of work, because at the moment the most burdensome is the social cultural department. It has 300-something action plans to follow up. So they come up with number of suggestions. I saw some. My interest is only to look at the human rights, how ASEAN Secretariat staff perceive the body dealing with human rights. So one of the suggestions was that the all human rights mechanism like ACWC, ASEAN Commission for Women and Children, ICHR, ASEAN Intergovernmental Commission on Human Rights, as well as the ASEAN Committee on Migrant Workers should be in one department and served by a specific body under the Secretary General. So at the moment, ICHR is served by the Department of Community and Corporate Affairs, and ACWC has been served by Department of Social Cultural, and they are not necessarily serving the purpose of coordination and collaboration. So this issue had been identified by the ASEAN Secretariat staff. So I guess I haven't seen the declaration. I'm actually quite surprised that ASEAN leaders come up with this solution, but I will look at it. So that's one thing that I would like to share. In relation to Bali Democracy Forum, the Bali Democracy Forum last year said goodbye to SBY, and the leaders expressed the expectation that Jokowi will continue to follow the step. So that's the expectation has been expressed last year. What I've been hearing so far, Jokowi is still in that commitment, continue to have Bali Democracy Forum to move forward, but perhaps he wanted something a new nuance in the Bali Democracy Forum, which I don't know to what extent he wants something different from before.
And also
so the question was about how is it ASEAN, to what extent is the new coming of this new administration in Indonesia will actually bring about potential change to the way in which ASEAN look at development. Yeah, from whether it will actually challenge the market-oriented approach of ASEAN. Well, let me put it this way. I think I recall that before our patron, one of our patron, once mentioned actually. I think she was quoting somebody else before. I remember it was about this. ASEAN has always been a testing ground for different concept of associated with regionalism. So although we are, we often put on paper certain things, that the implementation has always been different things. Can be so we are very. Our regionalism has always been adjustable, if you will, very fluid, dynamic. So I think it's more like practical and rational. I think also despite the, and I think this is also the same within the context of Indonesian economic policy as well. I think a lot of people are very afraid of Jokowi is actually going more inward and stuff like that. Which I think to a certain extent this concern has some validity. I mean, like you see a lot of things that have been doing economic policy, and also the number of non-tariff barriers. I mean, for example, talking about like on the economic side, the level of non-tariff barriers actually has not actually been reduced, and I think this is also one of the aspects that actually make him quite popular among business people. I'm afraid. So what I'm saying is that here. I think I don't think it will change the way in which ASEAN will use this, at least for the time being, because for the primary reason, it has always been ASEAN goals, at least the post 2000s, that we want to be a quite attractive investment region, and I think this is going to be critical, and this is also in line with Indonesia's own foreign economic policy. I think we do still need quite a lot of foreign investment, especially to support the economic growth that Jokowi government is promising. So I don't think it will to that extent will change significantly. What we will see, I think what we've been seeing so far, at least, is more, to me, it's more like rational policy making from the government, more like rational policy making. For example, you might have heard about this deliberation for the bill on the protection of the banking sector recently in Indonesia, which already been done since last year, but now being revived again this year. A lot of people are saying that it is actually closing down the Indonesian banking financial sector. But then again, as I understand it, also a question about Indonesia seeking reciprocal treatment from our neighbors, because why, for example, Malaysian banks can enter Indonesian market very easily, but then we're not able to actually enter Malaysian market very easily. Even like the most liberalized country in the region, like Singapore, is also imposing quite significant amount of restriction to Indonesian banks. So again, I think it's a question about nationality. I don't think it will actually change very significantly the way ASEAN economy and development ideology.
Thank you, Mas Alex. As we have now run out of time, I'd like to close this Talking ASEAN. Please join me in applauding the speakers. Before we go, I'd like to invite everyone to please visit our website, thcasean.org, where you can find the discussion reports, presentation, and photographs of this event and also all of our previous events. Thank you once again, and good afternoon, and have a very safe travel home. Thank you very much.
Good. Yuyun, congrats.